Thank you everyone for joining us today for the CIPS New England Chapter's March webinar, Women in Procurement panel. I am Mandy Wong with the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply team, and I will be your Zoom moderator this afternoon. If you have any questions during today's panel, please use the Q&A feature on the bottom center of your screen, and our guests today will do their best to answer them during the Q&A portion near the end of the panel discussion. And then at the conclusion of today's webinar, there will be a one question post-webinar survey for you to complete. Our webinar panel discussion today will be facilitated by Paula Gildert. She is the Global Head of R&D Procurement of Takeda based in London, UK. Paula joined Takeda in December of 2017 from Novartis, based in Switzerland, where she was Global Head of Development Strategic Sourcing. And prior to that, she was at AstraZeneca, where she led their Global Procurement Transformation Program and was Head Global R&D Procurement to deliver the transformation in one of the business's most challenging areas. She has over 30 years of experience in both chemical and pharmaceutical industries, in leadership roles in engineering, manufacturing, supply chain, and procurement. She's passionate about delivering breakthrough results and building powerful and effective teams. Paula is a physicist and a chartered electrical engineer. She has been an active member of the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply since 2008, was chairman of the board in 2010, president in 2013, and chair of the nominations committee and a member of the Board of Trustees from 2016 to 2019. Now, without further ado, I will turn things over to Paula and let her introduce the panelists that we'll be hearing from today.
Thank you, Mandy, and welcome everybody to our webinar. I am so excited to be working with a panel of fabulous colleagues and female procurement leaders. And I'm going to start by introducing them to you. So first of all, we have Jamie Crump, who's president of the Richwell Group. Hi, Jamie. The Richwell Group is a consultancy in supply chain procurement and supply diversity. Company was founded in 2017 and works with organizations from small businesses to Fortune 500 companies. Jamie's career in strategic sourcing and supply diversity crosses a variety of industries, including banking, heavy equipment rental, pharmaceuticals, technology, telecoms, welding, medical supply. She brings this expertise to the Richwell Group on projects ranging from overall strategies to specific bid projects and supplier diversity challenges. She's also an author of Backstage Pass, Pulling the Curtain Back on the Business of Supplier Diversity, a go-to reference to ensure success in building and implementing a supplier diversity strategy. She has also served on a number of boards and in industry trade associations. Currently, she's on the Board of Trustees for the National Small Business Association and on advisory board members to Diversity Professional, ProcureCon, and Spend Matters. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm next delighted to introduce a fellow co-worker at Takeda, Jessica Hilton, who is head of research operations at Takeda. Takeda is a global R&D biopharmaceutical company, and it's driven to advance the translation of science into highly innovative medicine. It's celebrating 240 years as a traditional Japanese company, now global, and it continues to be committed to bringing a better health and a brighter future to people worldwide. Jessica's job leads research operations for all Takeda worldwide, with specific focus on translating that organizational vision into operational and process improvement strategies, incorporating things like lean, scalable concepts, seeking cost-saving opportunities and strategies that center on increasing transparency and efficiency. Jessica's valued experience helps to contribute towards accelerating more science and medicines to our patients. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you, Paula. Hi, everyone.
And now Lynn Henchey is a director of supply chain at Hyde Tools based in Southbridge, Massachusetts. Hyde is a manufacturer of paint prep tools and machine knives. It's a family-owned business and operated since 1875. Corporate Hyde Group brands include Hyde, A. Richard, Industrial Blade Solutions, DNS, and PDK. Lynn is responsible for all procurement and transportation services at Southbridge and at Berthierville, Quebec. Berthierville, you're gonna correct me.
You got it. You got it.
She is also responsible for a team of 5 across the 2 facilities who manage the tactical day-to-day activities of procurement, which include raw materials, steel, finished goods, components, packaging, and services. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you very much. Sorry, my lights went out. It'll happen.
Oh, I hope it stays on. And last but by no means least, Joanna Martinez is former CPO and founder of Supply Chain Advisors. Joanna is an author, speaker, and C-suite advisor with a special focus on helping companies and individuals achieve great results in spite of business turbulence. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? An engineer, Joanna has spent her career in supply chain and procurement roles, assisting companies that were, in her words, battered by disruptive forces, creating innovative ways to grow their bottom line or reduce costs. For the last 3 years, she has been designated a top global influencer and thought leader in both procurement, supply chain, and digital disruption by Thinkers 360. She's written a book, A Guide to Positive Disruption, which draws on her experiences making positive changes at organizations for which she has worked and provides a framework to follow for those who want to be successful in a business undergoing disruption. I think that's all of us, right? Her latest project is a set of online learning modules and masterclasses to help people in business understand digital concepts like blockchain and artificial intelligence. Wow, we are honored. Thank you, ladies. So we have a number of questions, and I'm going to start with the first question and ask each and every one of my delightful panel to give their view. And the question is, can you talk about how you chose procurement? What inspired you to pursue a career in the industry and in this lofty profession? And I'll start with Lynn.
Thank you, Paula. Really, it chose me. You know, I was given an opportunity to move from a position in customer service long ago into strategic sourcing, and I ran with it. I loved it. I love negotiating. I love being in the driver's seat. So I took the reins and ran. Haven't looked back.
I was trying to mute and then I couldn't unmute. How many hundreds of thousands of times has that happened in the last 12 months? Hands up, who knows that problem?
Yeah.
So, Jamie. Jamie, over to you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, similar to Lynn, it did sort of choose me. I was working at a welding and medical supply and started helping out in the procurement office with a gentleman who had it there. And there was a big disruption. Joanna, you should have been there. There was a big disruption and a lot of people left the company at the same time. I would love to tell you it was my great talent, but it was more like I was one of those people where the building comes down and you're standing there, you know, with a little dust and that's it. And I ended up at the age of 21 running procurement for them. So I loved it. I had a knack for it. And as Lynn said, I've never looked back.
I love this theme. Jessica.
So I've been most of my career has been in finance, over 20 years, not including the past 7 years in biopharma. So going into procurement was a natural progression for me. I can definitely relate with Lynn's comment around being in the driver's seat. It's something that I enjoy doing in procurement, but also, you know, having the empowerment to work with stakeholders. Not just from a cost savings perspective, but from a quality perspective and really aligning with them on their goals and, you know, and how best to meet their needs. So it's really fun helping to help optimize their bottom line.
Thank you, Jessica. And Joanna.
Well, I was about 3 weeks away from becoming the first female plant manager in the division for which I was working. I was working for a part of Johnson & Johnson, and I was going to be the flagship plant manager at for the flagship facility, which made adhesive bandages. Suddenly, my boss was gone. A new person was there. There had been a restructuring. I was not going to be the next adhesive bandage plant manager, all bets were off. And after a couple of weeks of uncertainty, the new vice president took me for a walk and said, you know, I came here to change things. This division's not doing well and it needs a real shakeup. But I am loath to fire you because you appear to have some brains. However, sadly for you, your replacement has already bought a house. So I don't know what to do with you except this. We think that the director of procurement is fabulous. He wants to move into mergers and acquisitions, and we want him to move to M&A. But there's nobody to replace him. So you can go to procurement. You have to start at the bottom and work your way up, and it will take a long time. It'll take a few years. But when you're ready, we will invest in you, and that we will put you in the job with the commitment that when he says you're ready to be the procurement director, we'll move him out and move you up.
So I think
that's how I started.
It's a very lovely set of consistent themes, isn't it? I think you were chosen. You were chosen. That's what I'm going to go with from that. Thank you so much. So the second question is also to all of you, because I think this builds up the journey of your stories. So panelists, what has been your biggest challenge in business so far? And you have to pick the biggest, because I'm sure you've had many. And I'll go in reverse order this time. Joanna.
So for me, it was coping with all of the disruption that I lived with. I spent my career, you know, as was in the bio, working with companies that were undergoing hard times, and you know, lived through 18 reorganizations, and that can be a tremendous deflector, right? It deflects your attention. You feel this burden kind of sitting on your head, and so for me, the biggest challenge was understanding that the first few were not anomalies and that it was really going to be a way of life. And I had to understand and figure out how to cope with it and still have a meaningful, positive career with a lot of accomplishments and not spend all of my time worrying.
No, that's a nugget, isn't it? Not spend all your time worrying. Brilliant. Jessica.
It's actually one I still find challenging today is balancing my work and personal life. You know, 2020 for all of us was a challenging year, but it really forced me to evaluate how I can better balance my professional and my work-life balance. But also, you know, you want to do a good job and you want to produce a work product. So I'm always looking for ways to stay in the know of what's happening within the industry that I'm in, but also what's happening around. So I find that it's something every day I try to become better in accomplishing, especially the work-life balance thing, especially that.
Yeah, it's a high purpose, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Jamie.
I think for me, I was fortunate in a couple of companies early in my career that I progressed fairly rapidly. And so that led me to a situation where I was then managing people who had been either at a higher level than me or I had been colleagues with. And suddenly, you know, you couldn't go out to lunch with them on Friday afternoon and complain about the boss because you were the boss. And learning the dichotomy of changing that relationship and making it so that everyone was comfortable with it, number one, and two, that you were generating the results that you needed to do in order to be successful in the position.
Yeah, that's a tough transition, I think, for everybody, indeed. Thank you for bringing that up. And Lynn, your biggest challenge?
You know, mine is very similar to what Jessica was saying, that work-life balance. But when I first started in procurement, I had 2 children who were at perfect ages for me to begin traveling and not be home all the time. And then lo and behold, found out I was having a third. And that was years after I had had my tubes tied. So I wasn't expecting a third child. It was a shock, to say the least. So balancing all of that, and at the same time too, I had just graduated with my undergrad degree and contemplating going on for a master's degree, and decided that wasn't something that was in my cards to manage, you know, teenagers, a baby, and work and everything else. But knowing that balance and understanding that balance and being able to do everything really is the biggest challenge. I think it's something that will follow us all through our careers until that time when it's our time to retire and to just think about ourselves for a minute.
Do we have to wait that long, Lynn?
Well, I haven't gotten there yet, Paula, so.
I think we might come back to that topic, actually. The number of roles and how we put such pressure on to be the best at all of them. I mean, what a construct. So thank you, ladies, for giving us a beautiful grounding in, you know, your background, how you came to procurement, and challenges. So now I'm going to ask Joanna and Jamie and Jessica to talk to us about the role of women in senior levels, executive positions, and how we continue to have this, I would say, fight against bias, whether it's conscious or not, at all levels. And how do we get more women into those senior levels? And how would you describe the biggest challenge for the next generation of women? And how can we be strong role models? So that's quite a few things, isn't it? How do we get more senior women in to organizations? What is the biggest challenge for the next generation? And how can we role model for them? So I'll start with Joanna.
Well, you're asking this question at a great time, because Sunday night I had a dinner guest, a retired CEO, and I mentioned that I had a busy week this week, that there was a lot going on. You know, it was International Women's Week. And he said, "What do you mean bias?" He goes, "That's like old school stuff. That doesn't happen anymore." And he challenged me to give some examples of bias. And he threw the first few away because he said, "Oh, that was too many years ago." So I'm sitting there sipping wine, having dessert. And I had one situation and then another, and they kept coming. And I kept eating. So, and I probably will never have him as a dinner guest again because it did not end well. But I couldn't believe that anyone today with even the tiniest toe in the business world would not accept the fact that there is some level of bias against women. And I was asked to give some advice a couple of weeks ago, and it was that you have options. One is to stay in the company you're in and work hard, set your sights on the goal that you want, try to get a mentor and work at it, number one. Number two, you can look at industries and companies that have histories of supporting women and move in that direction, right? There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, this is going to be a better path for me to do it, because you can always get to the C-suite and then move back to a firm that really needs your direction. And the third option is to do it yourself and create your own C-suite.
Nice one. Thank you. What a good way to start us off. So let's go next to Jamie.
Well, I think that, you know, you have choices. You make choices every day, and you make choices to stay or you make choices to leave. But early in my career, I was working with a group that actually we were doing a project, and when the project was finished, most of these people were going to be out of a job. And I was aghast that that's who they had given me as the transition team. But there was one gentleman there who I asked, I said, "Well, you know, what kind of advice can you give me at this company to be successful?" And he said, "You know, you can have as much authority as you're willing to presume here." And I thought about that, and I thought, you know, that's great. I can do that. And that is advice that has served me well. I think that a lot of times I have not experienced as much bias as a lot of my colleagues. But I think part of that is because I go into the situation pretty much letting people in the room know I don't intend to have to deal with that. And if it does come up, and this is advice I give young women all the time, do not let it slip by. You know, I think the biggest thing that we do against ourselves is to just let it go. And so there's a lot of ways you can do it that is not hostile, but, you know, just halt and say, I'm sorry, what do you mean by that? Or can you explain that, please? Or I'm not sure I feel like I deserve that. Can you go into a little more detail? And call it out. And I think that a lot of times when you do that, people will either step back, or it invites the discussions that really do need to take place in order for us to do away with it completely.
Very nice, very practical. And what's your experience, Jessica?
Well, first I have to give you a shout out, Paula, because I've been privileged to work with other industry leaders like yourself, like my current manager, who really, really empowers women to succeed. And I love that because I've always been that same kind of leader. So I want to acknowledge that first of all. And the biggest takeaway is, I think, you know, here's a panel of professional women. There are professional women that are watching this event. And I think, you know, doing an outreach. I'm a big fan of reaching out. If there's opportunities that I know of, encourage other women that it is okay to seek those opportunities. I think I always try to remember that not every woman is fearless enough to deal with conflict. And I think we have to recognize that. So for the women that speak out, let's encourage, let's continue to encourage one another. Let's continue to empower one another and not, you know, not bring anyone down. Each and every one of us has a skill and a value to bring to the table. And I think that is some of the ways that we can have more senior women executives in this position. And I would say the same for the next generation too. I was born in the 70s. We didn't have social media. We didn't have Wi-Fi. We didn't have all this technology, right? And so I grew up going to a library to get information. Right now, today, information's available at your fingertips. Utilize that. Educate yourself. I think, Jamie, you mentioned, or was it Lynn, working hard. We got to do the work. But as women professionals, let's continue to encourage and empower each other. I've been really fortunate throughout my career to have that. And I'm a big fan of paying it forward.
Nice, very nice. I think that's a great expression as well. It has a lot of depth. Thank you, thank you. So our next question is going to go to Jessica and Jamie, and it's about how were you able to succeed in the industry? Did you build alliances to succeed? And we'll start with Jamie.
I do build alliances. You know, procurement is a lot about, you have a lot of internal customers. And if you're providing for those customers, then you're going to be able to acquire more customers, just like you do in a sales in a sales setting. But also, you know, it's about getting the best value for the company. So I have always been, you know, I want to go set with the customers. I want to understand what they're doing. I've been fortunate that a lot of the work that I've done has been in indirect, and it's been across different industries. That has allowed me to see a lot of different things being done. You know, that's not to say that I'm an expert by any means in that stuff, but it's enough to have the conversations. I think it's also, you know, you have to treat them like they're customers. You know, I've had several people comment, I tend to call mine internal clients, and people are like, oh, I've never been called a client before. But that's really what it is. I'm trying to bring them a solution and help them make an informed choice in some area. And, you know, spend the money for the company as well as possible. So I think getting to know them and understanding what their requirements are. And, you know, vocabulary is so important when you're dealing with internal stakeholders. If they call it one thing, that's what you should call it, you know. If they call it procurement, don't call it supply chain. You know, it's that type of small thing that can really help build those bridges and relationships. And I think that then provides a better solution overall, because not only are you getting better requirements and it's working better, but it also gives you more leeway. There are times when you need to go in and go, hey, you know, there's something else we need to look at here. Stakeholders are very close to the solution, and can have a very vested interest in the outcome. And sometimes you have to be that objective third party in the room that says, no, we also have to look at this and this and this over here. It makes it easier to have those types of discussions if there's a mutual relationship and respect and trust there.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big theme right now, isn't it? About how we build better communities and relationships, that valued, respected, heard. Very powerful. Yes, thank you. Jessica, how have you succeeded, and do you build alliances?
Yeah, I have the comment, everything Jamie said.
I write it down.
Yeah, it takes a village. Listening to and understanding your external partners, which is what I call them, because it is a partnership. So yeah, so everything Jamie said, exclamation, exclamation.
Elegant. Why make it complicated? This next question then is in this direction of advice, and I'm putting this to Joanna. And the question is, do you have advice for students, women or not, who are eager to take on roles in procurement? And what do you believe that young women or young people need to know, hear, or see to consider procurement as a career option?
So 3 words: become digitally savvy. Now, I can't take the credit for saying that. Chris Sawchuk from the Hackett Group said that probably 7 years ago in a talk that he gave, and it remains just as true today. Procurement organizations have had the burden and the benefit of having reduced costs tremendously over the years. And the kind of cost reduction, the kind of negotiation that takes place just by sitting across the table with someone is the opportunities from that are diminishing. More and more, it is the process as well that you have to look at. You need to understand what your supplier is doing in terms of automation, in terms of RPA or artificial intelligence, the kinds of things that they're implementing, so that you can have a view for the kinds of trajectory and the kinds of investment that the firm is making. And if you don't understand the basics, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be able to sit down and implement a blockchain application, but you do need to know enough. Yeah, you're safe. You do need to know enough to ask the right questions and to know when someone tells you there's AI embedded in this and you say, how, give me an example, and they can't, you know that either that's a very poor salesperson or there really isn't artificial intelligence, because more and more those digital technologies are forming the foundations for process improvement, for how cost is developed, and things like that.
That is such exquisite advice. I think you could have been present in about 10 of the meetings I was in today. This is a powerful topic. I think we could have, Mandy, a whole session on that. There's a thought. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to help you. It's a passion.
Good. Let's have an alliance. I'm moving now to a question which is a little bit more personal, and I hope you will be generous with us and the question in the spirit that it is intended. So the question is about that inner voice the thing that's speaking to you now, saying, where the hell is she going with this? So this inner voice, and many times we find that it is there to help us, but sometimes it can be a very loud negative narrative. And what I'd like to ask is Jessica and Lynn to talk to us about how they work with that inner voice and sort of stop the negative talk where it comes to your career and facing challenges and having impact in the world. Jessica.
I've been lucky in my career to work in the private equity industry. And one of the many things that I've learned there was, don't take anything personal. And the other thing I learned was 99% of the time, it is not about you. And I say that because oftentimes in the work that we do, we are working with people, whether it's with our colleagues, whether it's with external suppliers, our stakeholders, and some of the situations that we encounter can be challenging, can be conflicting. And so oftentimes, you know, to be successful in what you do, find ways to get out of your own way and just focus on what is the situation at hand and how best to achieve it in the best possible way that you can. None of us are perfect. And I think that's another thing that we have to remind ourselves, is that in most of the tasks and goals and achievements that we want to do, it's not done on your own. It's usually done with some level of help. And so I think if you embed in your mind, you're doing the work the best way you can, and it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to get out of your own way. Don't take things personal. And it's not about you. You set that foundation, you'd be amazed how you open yourself up to so many possibilities to achieve and to break through, right? So it's a breakthrough in yourself, but also in how you work and correspond and interact with one another. And the other thing too, I mean, we're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the idea of the permission, the possibility, gives you access to different thoughts and ideas. Yes. To sort it out, instead of thinking I've got to sort it myself. It's right. In fact, let's be inclusive. Let's ask. Yeah, lovely. Private equity. Who'd have thought that we'd have learned something as beautiful as that from private equity?
Oh yeah.
Lynn, tell us your thoughts on this topic.
That's awesome, Jessica. And I'm just gonna add on. I had to make notes for myself because I'm very passionate about this. The very first thing that I think of all the time, and I'm going to go back to what Jessica said earlier, to be fearless, conquer your fears. Ask yourself, have a monologue in the back of your mind saying, what's the worst that's going to happen? Are you just going to get a no? I mean, if we're talking death to yourself or someone else, okay, yeah, that's a no. But otherwise, you just keep moving forward. You just conquer that fear and keep moving forward. It's amazing what it'll do. The other thing I find that as women, we have this tendency to apologize for everything. And it drives me crazy. The women that have worked for me or worked with me, I always have to stop them and say, please stop apologizing. Everybody makes mistakes. Make a decision, have a reason for your decision, and move forward. Don't apologize for what you did. You did the best that you could. The other one I have is to be confident, not cocky, but confident. Speak confidently. You're the expert at that moment in time when you're having that conversation. And if you say it that way, it's amazing how many times people will just stop and listen because they don't know any better. You're confident in what you're doing. You are the expert. Show that confidence. And then finally, another pet peeve of mine is to present solutions rather than problems. And I think there's a lot of times, especially as we get higher up in our careers and we start moving up that ladder, that we are looked at as troublemakers, so to speak. You always have a problem, but you never have a solution. And that's one of the things I always ask for my employees is, if you're going to come to me with something, have a recommendation. I may not go with your recommendation. I may have a completely different idea, but bring me a solution. Don't just bring me a problem. And it really makes a world of difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of consulting companies have made a fortune about the I wish I knew how, and you know, the way you express it, always with that baked in solution. Thank you, ladies, for I mean, that's a big topic, the self-limiting inhibition stuff. Again, Mandy, topic number 2 for a future chapter meeting. So my last question, because we do want to have some time for Q&A, is to all the panelists. I love this because well, I think it's a very powerful question. People listening, please tell us what you think. So the question is, any advice you would want to give to your younger self? And we'll start with Joanna.
So this actually is a comment on what Jessica said about balancing with her family. And I struggled with that too, until one day sitting in a pediatrician's office, I read an article where a mom said, you know, stop trying to find balance. Your life will never be balanced because balance implies compromise everywhere. In fact, your life is blended. And there are 24 hours in a day. And some days you won't get any sleep or not very much sleep. And other days you can catch up. And that you need to stop looking at your life in these discrete little blocks, but understanding the broader amount of time you have. How are you going to let it flow in order to meet the demands of the time? For me, that was absolutely life-changing, because I started to view it all differently and understand that, you know, I had to give something up on some days, and some days the family won and some days work won.
Yeah. Wow. I feel lighter already. I wish I'd met you a few years ago, Joanna. Oh, dear goodness. Lynn, do you want to go next?
Sure. I love that, by the way, Joanna. Thank you for that.
Okay, you're welcome.
For me, it's really, if I could teach myself something, it would be focus on what you can control. So much of the time we spend worrying or doing at times are things that are completely outside of our control. And if we can just kind of narrow that in and just manage the things that we can, it frees us up from all the extra.
Wow. I want to say more. Please say more, Lynn. Because often we're not in control. And that's when we have to try and find, and I don't know if there's another panelist's view on that. When you're not in control, what's the strategy? Joanna.
Well, for me, not being in control, all of those disruptions and all of those times that, you know, the companies I worked for were undergoing change. To me, it's to have a plan. To early on in your career, just sit down and understand, you know, what is the worst that can happen here and how am I going to cope with that? And once you have something, and I mean, I've told young people, call your parents and tell them not to renovate your old bedroom and make it into a Pilates studio yet. You know, have a little backup plan there. And once you've worked it through in your brain, of course, disruptions are, you know, cause concern and angst, but the level goes way down and you can plow your way through it once you sort of have a plan.
Yeah.
And I think Serena Williams in an interview once said, you know, if my plan A isn't working, I have a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D. And I think that we need to do that as well.
Yeah, that goes to resilience, doesn't it? Jamie.
I think if I could go back, there would be two things that I would tell myself. One is this was a powerful lesson for me, which was I was getting ready to launch my company, and I was working with a very good friend of mine who's had also bought a business and started one. And I was getting ready to go to my first conference. And I said, you know, I got my business cards today and I really don't like them. They're kind of flimsy and I'm not happy with them at all. And I said, you know, so I think what I'm going to do is reorder them, and I can have them, you know, overnighted to the hotel. And then I'll have that. And he just stopped me and he said, you know, first of all, you're not in corporate anymore. You don't have an expense account. You can't afford to buy things twice and have things overnighted. He said, second is take the ones you have. And if you hand that business card to anyone during the conference and they take it and go, huh, I thought it would be thicker. He said, I will give you $50 every time that happens. And the lesson there is we get so in our own way because we have this vision of what we think something should look like or what the end game should be like. Nobody else knows that. And we have all this angst and stress that we put on ourselves because, oh my God, it didn't come out the way I wanted this to be this way. I wanted this. I wanted to say this and be, you know, absolutely wonderful. People don't know that. All they know is what they've received. And if they're happy with it, then, you know, then probably you should be. And the other thing then touches back on what Jessica said, which is, it is almost never, ever, ever about you. And if you can keep that in mind and just roll with it, then I think that, you know, whenever you think it is, let that tiny voice repeat that back to you. And then, you know, straighten your crown and move on.
Straighten your crown. Do you know, I can't write down the nuggets fast enough. I need some kind of dictaphone. I should have taped. So Jessica, the question to you, younger self.
Talk less and listen more. That is numero uno. And don't be a know-it-all. Try not to be the smartest person in the room. You'll be amazed what you learn from everyone around you. And it is definitely okay to work outside your comfort zone. As a matter of fact, there's a greater reward when you take more risks in your career and what you do and you work outside your comfort zone. And one my mom always tells me all the time is, can always educate yourself. Even with the degrees and the certifications I have, we all have, every day, try to learn something new. Every single day, educate yourself.
Great advice. Very, very nice. So I know we're going to go to the panel of questions, and I can see that they're coming in. But before we do, I just want to give a huge thanks to the candor and fabulous feedback you've given to these questions. I'm going to try and pick out a few at the end. And Mandy, what I'd like to do is offer up a digest of some of them for our participants, if they'd like it as a free takeaway. But thank you, ladies. Thank you so much for those great responses. And I think we have more fuel on the fire now. Mandy, over to you.
Yeah, so we have a couple of questions in the pipeline for our panelists. So this one came in kind of at the beginning of our panel event. So one of our attendees asked, she mentioned that great stories from all the panelists about how everyone kind of procurement chose them. And her question is, what are you all doing to bring in another woman in procurement? And I think we touched on that on one of the first questions that we did. I think the question that we can really have you all elaborate a little bit more on is, do any of you have women network that you would start to consider to coach women in procurement, or any networking opportunities and groups that you might recommend?
Oh, I think we should all have a go at that one. And this is the the New England Chapter So I think local knowledge is very, very powerful here. Who'd like to go first? Joanna?
You know, I'm thinking, so I actually am, spent many years in Connecticut, actually have lived there for almost 30 years. So I guess if this were in person, I would be sitting at the New England meeting. But I have to say, other than the Global Women in Procurement LinkedIn group, which I think Jamie can knows more about than I do, there's nothing hopping out at me. I think that Procurement Foundry has a women's group as well, or at least a group that's focused on diversity in procurement. For me personally, what I do is I do a lot of coaching. So, within my network, as a volunteer, I spend time with women who are preparing big presentations, going to a big interview and want to test out their questions. I mean, I try to give back in that way. But in terms of big formal organization, I'm not the best person to ask.
So anybody on the panel who has a network that they've kicked off or launched in the neighborhood, or maybe that's the next step? Whoever asked the question, take the first step.
Paula, actually, Anita, the attendee who asked that question, she actually started a networking coaching group for bilingual women to learn about procurement. So Anita, if you would like, you can share in the chat for all the attendees here, just so we can get a look into that.
Yeah, what a good idea. I mean, I know lots of companies can and do encourage resource groups. I think the nomenclature varies in different countries, and many of those resource groups, employee resource groups, ERGs, they're coming out of the D&I work often, are around females then, not just in procurement, but in business. And if you have a desire to get that sort of thing going, it's very easy to do. I think we are naturally good connectors. You get a few friends. It starts the infamous book clubs. How many book clubs have you been in where the book never gets read, but there's loads of, but I think we can be our own initiators of this outside the workplace, but also in the workplace. Yeah. Any other thoughts from panelists?
I think the groups are kind of, there's an acquired taste there. So, you have to find what's gonna feed you and what works with your schedule and what you're looking for. For me, being also in supplier diversity, I find a lot of my good ones is working with women business owners because they are, they're out there building it every day. They have to be confident. They have, they're the one in charge. So I find that I get a lot of energy from working with them. WeBank, the Women Business Enterprise certifying body, has a chapter up in New England. And I know that they have things that they do fairly often. But I've also just, if there's somebody that I admire or somebody that, interests me, don't be afraid to ask. One of the best experiences I had once was we had a new senior VP that joined the company, and it was the first woman at that level. And when they asked me about training that year, I told my boss, I said, I want to carry her briefcase for a week. And he thought it was really interesting. So he asked her and she said yes. And I had like 4 days with her. She hauled me around in her car as she went from place to place. So I got to see her in action, but then I got a lot of one-on-one time with her in the car in between times. And she'd say, what do you think of that? And what do you think? What did you think I was doing there? So, don't be afraid to ask. If they can't and they say no, again, don't take it personal. Someone said that earlier. But, if somebody looks like they could teach you something, see if they will.
So that actually leads to a fantastic question that we got in the Q&A, which is, hello all, could one of the panelists talk about the role of procurement in supplier diversity? And are there any examples of having women in procurement making a difference in including diversity in the supply base?
Oh, Jamie, you got to kick us off on that one. Is it chapter 1, paragraph 1? Yeah. Brilliant question, Jamie.
You know, it does. And I think that, I mean, I've had responsibility for supplier diversity within supply chain at several companies. And now I work with companies who are trying to do just that. So I think, you know, one of the things that works the best is when somebody is trying to push back. There are things that women can get away with that men can't necessarily. In terms of giving them the steely eye of, really, we're not doing that, really. And I was never above using that at all. But I think that, you know, women bring that, that inclusiveness. And part of that is because we haven't always been included. And so we, you know, now it's time to pay it forward, as we were talking about earlier. And part of that is making sure that it's women-owned companies, that it's minorities, that it's, you know, disabled and veteran and all of that, and make sure that those opportunities are there and that they're being utilized. So yeah, I think there's a definite benefit. And I would just say, you know, stand your ground and don't blink.
And I think the diversity thing for supply chains for me is such a frustrating slow pace about it. I think, you know, it's so variable across the world. Some countries it's legally required, in the US, for example, and I think that's really accelerated things. And then it leads to industries or parts of the industry where you've got companies validating that they are truly women-owned or minority-owned and so on and so on. But it's less mature in other countries. And this just gives us such a longer runway, which is frustrating. But I also thought in the pandemic, that was the pandemic that we're still in, that the local supply chains, I thought that might have given a big boost for companies and industries that can exploit them to think again more locally. I mean, has that been a practice that you've experienced? I see some nods.
I think certainly it has from the local standpoint. I think also social media has had such an impact on that. I mean, you cannot underestimate it, because companies before did not want to say one way or the other what they were doing. And now, if, you know, now I want to do business with companies that support what I support, and I know if they are or not. And I think that's why you see companies now taking stands and coming forward. You have venture capital firms now that are saying, we're not going to invest in you unless you can show us what your diversity program is for, you know, for the board and for the C-suite, as well as supplier diversity. And all of that is contributing to kind of that groundswell that you see that's coming along, which really can move it along faster, I believe. But I think the one thing for me has always been, you treat it like it's a business strategy. It's not a community involvement. It's not something that you do like your United Way every year. It's as much a business strategy as having sound financials. And if you treat it that way, and you use the same tools and mechanisms that you use for those other business strategies, then I think you find it will happen a lot faster.
And I think everyone on this call, those of us here on the panel and those folks listening in, you know, as the world starts to sort of wake back up again, and as business goes from business critical, like, oh, we're all focused on these very tactical things, and starts to go back to some strategic thinking, we have an opportunity to capitalize on the COVID goodwill that's out there. All the people that rolled up their sleeves and jumped in and figured out all these crazy ways to make things happen. Well, now as you go back, you've got an opportunity to say, you know, maybe that plan where all of these components were coming from this factory in China was not such a good idea. And so let's go to a blended model and look at local suppliers and give something back to the community here that is still buying from us, and you know, rejigger these plans so that they are not so fully tilted towards lowest cost scenario, but consider, you know, diversity, risk management, you know, and other things that are important.
There's never been a better time to put change in play.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, you know, before it was like, well, why haven't we been doing this all along if it's so great, or why do you want to change things now? You know, the two areas of my life, you know, supply chain and supplier diversity, have never been looked at as closely as they have in 2020. So if there was ever a time where you could feel completely comfortable going in and saying, I think we need to change a few things up, now is it. Take the opportunity.
There's a theme, like a red thread through all of this, isn't it? It is about being in business, business leaders. If you're in procurement, you're in business. There aren't many functions. I mean, 50 cents on the dollar. It's such a strategic asset. And when you bring in all the thoughts that you ladies have about how we execute business, the partnerships we build, the value we attribute to the different ways of working that we have, we have so much to bring to society, our businesses, and the communities in which we operate. Really fabulous. Any other questions? Mandy, I can see the clock is ticking.
So we have another question. This attendee is asking, is it possible for a woman born in the early 70s to break into leadership roles? How would you suggest to go about it?
Women in their early 70s.
No, women born in the 70s, I think.
I was going to say, I'm heading there.
Born in the 70s?
That question.
Yeah, born in the early 70s.
I was born in 73. Yeah.
Go.
Yeah. Yes. It's never too late. When I got my bachelor's degree, getting the degree was not the highlight. It was one of my classmates who was 72 at the time, and he had all of his children and grandchildren go to college before he did. That was the highlight of my graduation when I did my undergraduate. And he was one of the inspirations of my getting my MBA, because you're never too old. You're only as old as how you feel. So for anyone that's born in the whatever year, if you want to do something and you're afraid to do it, make the commitment that today is the first new chapter in your life, and do it.
But I think if your question comes from a viewpoint that you're in a company and you're not getting an opportunity and you perceive that there's a bias there, then, you know.
So you have to pivot. So you have to pivot. In 2014, I moved out of New York, and I left an industry that I've been in for over 20 years. I moved to New England. I've been in the life sciences industry, and it has been tremendous. And it is a risk. Sometimes you have to take the risk. So it goes back to that inner voice we were talking about, and moving away from the negative talk. You have to believe in yourself and reach out. You know, we're all talking about reaching out and getting help and building that network. Don't be afraid. I think Jamie was one that said, like, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Just do it. Like Nike says, do it.
Yes, because I think there are many factors that can frustrate one's desire or will or ambition to progress, whatever it is. And I think that there is only one person responsible for your career. It's yourself.
Yourself.
Yes.
And,
yes.
You know, regrets is another concept, isn't it? Live a life of regrets, no thanks.
Yes.
The only regrets are the ones I wished I hadn't done, you know, no. So great question. Did we do it service, Mandy? I can't see the exact wording of it. Did we hit the question, or did we?
Yep, so we've hit all the questions in our Q&A queue.
So maybe we have just 1 minute and we will finish on time. Awesomeness. I mean, panelists, there were some nuggets. You know, it chose me. What a wonderful industry or profession to be in. If it chooses you, then you are powered for success, aren't you? Don't spend all your time worrying. Presume authority. Women who empower are enabling the next generation and colleagues, whatever gender, whatever diverse insight they bring. Outreach. pay it forward, understand customers, internal clients, bring solutions. Vocabulary is important. If you want to be understood, seek first to understand, to be honest. Brilliant. That was yours, Jamie, wasn't it? Joanna, be digital savvy. Yes, this is the key to a trajectory of asking the right questions. You don't have to know, you just have to know the right questions. That's so accessible. Brilliant. On the little voice, it was, don't take it personally. It's not about you. You're not doing it on your own. These are very empowering statements, ladies. I don't know where you got them, but they are rocket fuel. I do know where you got them. It came from your own experience. Don't apologize. Stop. What is the worst that can happen? Balance. Balance implies compromise. It's blended. Life's changing. And I think there's a generosity there, Joanna, isn't it? Generosity on ourselves, not to be perfect all the time. Listen more. Don't be a know-it-all. Be amazed at what you'll learn. And there were so many more. Ladies, it's been an absolute pleasure working with you. I'll hand over to Mandy. Thank you very much indeed.
All right, thank you for our fantastic panelists and our fearless and wonderful moderator, Paula, who helped guide us on a fantastic discussion and kept us in the time frame, a minute over, but it's okay. So thank you to all of our attendees for attending. In the chat, I have just sent out a registration link for our chapter's April 15th webinar, so you can click on that and register there. If you have any additional questions regarding today's webinar, you can feel free to contact CIPS at usainfo@cips.org. You can send us questions you may have for our panelists or moderator or for CIPS ourselves. So without further ado, we will say goodbye for today and we'll see you all next month. Thank you everyone for your time.
Awesome.
Thank you, ladies.
Bye, everyone.
Everybody, nice to see you all. Nice to see you, Jamie. Bye-bye.